Hi, I'm Chris Borgmeyer from Portland State University, and today I'm gonna talk about basic FBA to BSP and really focus on a district plan for effective implementation and how to really maximize your efforts when you're thinking about using the basic FBA to BSP program. So we're going to be guided by implementation science, largely the stages of implementation as well as the implementation drivers. And so I've found this to be a really useful lens, and you'll see it very commonly throughout the PBIS world and the work that we do in PBIS. So we'll use the implementations, the stages of implementation, and then the implementation drivers will also be kind of part of the ongoing conversation around planning for basic FBA to BSP. So we'll start with the exploration stage and kind of the readiness and commitments to and decision making to what as to whether or not a district should move forward with this, and also on another level whether schools are ready to move forward with this. The installation phase will be when we're actually installing the intervention, basically through the professional development, the plan for rolling it out and getting people started with moving towards the initial implementation. Um, and so the initial implementation is when we're first trying to get this rolling. We're trying to move closer and closer to fidelity. And then finally, the full implementation stage is when we're actually able to implement with a high level of fidelity and see the outcomes that we hope to see when we're implementing the program. And then the implementation drivers. So we're going to focus a lot on the competency drivers, the professional development drivers, training, coaching, ongoing assessment and evaluation. Then we'll also focus on, we'll talk a little bit about leadership drivers and organization drivers as we go through this presentation. So first things first, we're going to talk about the exploration stage, and this is really focusing on readiness and commitments, and are we ready to move forward with this initiative? Is it something that's a good fit? And so we want to consider what are the prerequisites, what are the things we should have in place prior to making a commitment to move forward with this. How do we plan to identify whether there's evidence that this program is worth moving forward with, whether it's a good fit for our school, our district, our region, our state, and then what's the feasibility of implementation in our school? What resources are going to be required? Is that going to be feasible for us to carry out? So functional behavioral assessment has long been an empirically supported research-based practice. It's been, in law for over 15 years now. Federal law in the United States, which has identified that we need to use functional behavioral assessment to inform the development of positive behavior support plans for students with IEPs who are at risk of missing 10 days of suspension or specialized instruction due to their behavior. And so functional behavioral assessment has a long history of efficacy research behind it. Lots and lots of studies out there that show the critical role that understanding function plays in informing interventions that have the highest likelihood of being successful. And so one of the things that we really emphasize in this basic FBA to BSP is that absolutely we need to conduct a good functional behavioral assessment, but if we don't actually use that information to develop and implement a behavior support plan based on the function of student behavior, it's kind of an exercise in futility. Anytime we do a functional behavioral assessment, it should inform implementation of a function-based behavior support plan. So we know that the research is out there. However, there are kind of some conflicting realities when we start looking into implementation in schools and in the real world. While there's a growing body of research that shows that functional behavioral assessment can be carried out in typical school settings by typical school personnel, we know that schools have oftentimes struggled pretty mightily to actually utilize functional behavioral assessment to inform and implement behavior support plans. And so there's all kinds of research that says even after folks get trained to do FBA, oftentimes we still see that there's a lot of punitive-based strategies, or there's a disconnect between the function of the behavior and the interventions that have been implemented. And so we've been continuing to try to identify ways to most effectively train school personnel to to carry out functional behavioral assessment and use that to inform and implement function-based behavior support plans. And that kind of leads us to the basic FBA to BSP. So here are some of the common issues that we've seen when we start thinking about some of these barriers to implementation of function-based behavior support plans. So oftentimes schools report having a lack of personnel with sufficient training to actually carry out functional behavioral assessment and then use that information to inform behavior support plans. Another common issue is oftentimes we wait so long to actually get the ball rolling with conducting a functional behavioral assessment and a behavior support plan, that we wait until teachers are completely exhausted and worn out with the student, and at that point they're oftentimes not very eager to put supports in place. And so another thing we want to really focus on is building capacity so we can get identify students early and get interventions and supports in place for the student and the teacher earlier in the school year. Oftentimes, and I can speak from personal experience as someone who has been a behavior specialist who's trying to go into schools and work and implement interventions, is I feel like I've got a pretty decent amount of training and expertise in actually doing functional behavioral assessments and implementing behavior support plans and working with teams as well. But oftentimes, if the schools don't have a context or a team or a routine in place, it's really difficult for specialists to come in effectively and bring the information they've collected in a functional behavioral assessment to a team that's going to lead to implementation. And so oftentimes the context and routines aren't supportive of function-based intervention and planning and support. And so we're going to focus on how to get those contexts and routines in place to have a more supportive school context. Oftentimes the specialist comes in and comes up with a brilliant plan, a brilliant idea with very limited or no input from the people who are actually going to be implementing the plan. And we call that a problem of contextual fit, when the plan, it might be expert enough, but it's not going to be implemented by the implementers. And so if it's not implemented, it's not going to be effective. And so we need to really look at involving implementers in the conversation actively to design the behavior support plan and really finalize the interventions that we're going to be implementing. And then oftentimes our plan implementers just have a very limited understanding of the basics of behavior and function of behavior and what function of behavior has to do with intervention planning. And so we feel like we need to do more staff-wide training for all folks in the building around the basics of behavior and function-based intervention. So basic FBA to BSP really strives to address some of these issues by incorporating these critical features. So the first thing is we're going to try to utilize an effective training approach, and we're going to pair that with coaching and feedback. So as we start talking about functional behavioral assessment and behavior support planning, we're really talking about individualizing intervention to the student's needs, and we figure out what we have to individualize based on the assessment information that we collect. And individualization is a challenging thing, and we need a certain level of expertise to be able to do that. And so we need to make sure that we're providing really good training and ongoing coaching and feedback to help people build fluency to be able to maintain those skills. So that's where basic FBA to BSP comes in. So one of the things we always emphasize is team training. We don't want to train individuals, we want to train teams so that we have the ongoing capacity and sustainability. And so we want to train multiple people within a school site. One of those should be the administrator, and the other folks should be folks who have capacity in their schedule to carry out functional behavioral assessment and behavior support plan responsibilities. So we train a team. One of the things that I get really excited about is the distributed training model that we use. So I've made the mistake over and over again that we do a 2-day, super comprehensive, cover it all training on functional behavioral assessment to behavior support planning, and it's super overwhelming for folks, and they can't process and put all that information together effectively because it's such an information dump all at one time. And so what we've really focused on is trying to distribute training. So there's 7 modules that are supposed to be delivered about every week and a half to 2 weeks apart. And there's homework tasks that are carried out that align with each of the modules. So not only do you get a training module where you get some hands-on opportunities to practice with interactive activities and so on, now you actually have an assigned homework task to put what you learned in that module to practice with a real case and a real student in a real school environment. And so then we want to bring that homework task back, and we know we've got to have coaching and feedback. So despite the best trainings out there and the best trainings available, when we're starting to talk about more complex practices in schools, we've got to have that ongoing coaching and feedback. And so with each of the modules, we've got coaching tools for providing feedback, and we really want to emphasize the need for ongoing coaching and support. And this is where we're oftentimes utilizing behavior specialists at the district level we're changing that role a little bit, where they're going to build capacity and provide ongoing coaching and training and feedback to school teams to develop the capacity locally to do basic FBA to BSP. And the other thing we know is that we need to look at the school context and see what things we can do to try to create a more supportive school context for implementing Tier 3 behavior support. So when we start talking about Tier 3 behavior support, we need people with the skills, but we also need staff and administration that are committed to supporting kids with challenging behavior. And we believe that there's a few things we can do that'll facilitate the likelihood that people are going to be supportive of trying to help these students through behavioral intervention. So we've built in a staff-wide training on the basics of behavior. So there's 2 modules, module number 1 and module 4, that we train to the entire staff so they get a understanding of the basics of behavior and an understanding of function-based intervention. We want to very clearly embed basic FBA to BSP as a Tier 3 intervention within a continuum of supports in the school. And so we know that Tier 3 intervention is individualized, which makes it time consuming and pretty resource intensive. So the best thing we can do for Tier 3 intervention is have a really strong Tier 1 implementation and support, our school-wide intervention, and have very strong Tier 2 interventions. And so we're making sure that the kids that we're having Tier 3 conversations about are the kids that we really need to be having Tier 3 conversations about. And if we can utilize less resources to support them effectively through a good Tier 1 and Tier 2 intervention, that's absolutely essential oftentimes given the limited resources that we have available in schools for Tier 3 intervention and support. The other thing that we think is critically important is if we can create capacity in school to do function-based behavior intervention, we can have more students identified earlier in the process. And I think one of the big barriers to implementation of behavior support plans is we oftentimes wait until the teachers are completely at wit's end, completely kind of experience burnt out feelings with these students. I always say, that if we're not talking to teachers until they're trying to get these kids out of their nightmares and they're experiencing PTSD symptoms when they see them, we don't have a chance of implementing with that teacher and implementing an intervention. We can't wait till February and March when the teachers can't take the student anymore. We got to start identifying these kids early in the process and lend a hand of support in October so we can work together more effectively, because by the time we get there in February, the common responses we hear are, I've done that, I've tried that, I've done that, I've tried everything, nothing's working. And folks aren't very invested in trying the interventions you're suggesting when they're having troubles, sleeping at night because of the stress they're feeling from the student. So we need to create the capacity in our schools for earlier student identification and early intervention at the Tier 2 and Tier 3 levels of support. All right. So as schools adopt Tier 2 and Tier 3, one of the things we hear often, and I've experienced this myself as a behavior specialist in a school district, is this feeling of being overwhelmed because there's too many requests to do functional behavioral assessment and to develop behavior support plans, and a crisis here, a crisis there, and we feel like firefighters putting out these fires constantly. And so if the if we're feeling overwhelmed, one of the premises, the primary premises of basic FBA to BSP is if we're feeling this overwhelmed, we need to invest in training others to carry out some of these responsibilities. And that's the whole goal of basic FBA to BSP, is to have an effective and uh, kind of a practical approach to training that can maximize our efforts here and really build capacity um, with the resources we have available. So we're going to look at how we can organize behavioral support at the district level a little bit differently. And so we're going to identify and train school personnel at each school to do the basic functional behavioral assessment and behavior support plans. We still are going to reserve, if those most complicated cases, the more complex cases, for bringing in a behavior specialist from the school district. But um, hopefully schools have increasing capacity to identify these cases early, put interventions in place early, and we see fewer and fewer of those extreme cases. Or when we do, that's where the behavior specialist can come in and be effective. And if they're operating in a system that already has a teaming process in place, uh, we're able to maximize the efforts of the behavior specialists when they're coming into the buildings. So we're going to try to identify and train school personnel at each building, and um, and then staff-wide training around basics of behavior and function-based intervention. So that's going to permeate across the schools, and then we're going to look at changing the behavior specialist's role and moving them away from being so much of a firefighter and putting out fires and responding to crises and being the specialist everybody's calling on for tier 3 support. They're going to take on more of a role of training and coaching PBIS. Maybe not at all 3 tiers level. They're going to be big advocates of tier 1 and tier 2, but we may really make sure that our district level behavior specialists, who are the people who should have the greatest level of knowledge and expertise in FBA and BSP, we want them to take on a role of coaching and training these basic FBA to BSP teams at each school site. So they're going to support teams through this process, especially in that initial implementation phase, as they're building fluency and they're building expertise in the buildings. The behavior specialists over time can fade some of their participation with schools that are starting to really show some proficiency, and that's where they're going to it's going to free up some time for them to be more focused on those more intensive cases at schools in the district. So we're building local capacity so the district behavior specialists can over time really invest more in some of the fewer, more complex cases, while hopefully the basic FBA to BSP teams at the schools can take care of some of the less complicated cases. And so the goal here is to train, say 3 to 4 people at each school to conduct basic FBA to BSP. So the theory this is built on is that on this continuum of students and students with varying needs, we know there's going to be kids who don't respond to tier 1 and tier 2 intervention, but we want to have the strongest tier 1 and tier 2 interventions in place. But even then, if you start to just isolate the top of the triangle, there's still a continuum within that top of the triangle. And so you can see at the very top here, kind of the deep red at the point of the triangle, these are the kids who are maybe have the most intensive needs, and we're going to have to do more complex, more comprehensive functional behavioral assessments with. So that's not the focus of this training program. The focus of this training program is basic FBA, and these are the kids who need some individualized intervention and attention and supports, but they're not as complex of cases. And so we want to build local school capacity to do the more basic FBA and BSPs. So again, that we can really utilize our district behavior specialists with more substantive training to do those complex FBAs. So kind of the difference between the basic and the complex. The basic FBA is going to be more for students with mild to moderate problem behaviors, behaviors that are not dangerous. If the behaviors are dangerous, they're probably going to require a crisis plan and some additional measures to make sure everything's safe, and probably needs to happen on a very short time frame to ensure the safety and to get the student back into school. Um, so that would a complex case would deal with the students with more dangerous behavior, more severe cases. And so if we find that we've got those students involved, we encourage you to bring in that district behavior specialist to be a part of those cases. But if it's more mild to moderate and it's not dangerous behavior, then it might stay within the school team. And so what they're going to do is they're going to engage in a simpler, more efficient process for behavior support planning, and they're going to do that. Internally, that team, the FBA to BSP team, is going to work with their school-based team to implement this plan. Uh, Conversely, the complex FBA, like we said, it'd be students with more dangerous behavior, moderate to severe. These would be kids who might be having, uh, you know, real behavior problems all day long, every day, rather than, being able to isolate problem behavior to a couple different, 2, 3 different periods of the day. But these students with requiring more complex support, this is going to be a much more time-intensive process that's going to involve, like we had mentioned, maybe emergency planning, crisis planning. There might be some family-centered planning and participation and collaboration with outside agencies. And so there's going to be a lot more people around the table, and probably a lot more moving parts as we think about community, mental health, family supports, and those sorts of things. So the basic FBA to BSP training file consists of these 7 modules. And so you start with kind of the basics of understanding behavior. Then we go into FBA interviewing, conducting FBA observations, and then modules 4 and 5 focus on transitioning from the functional behavioral assessment information into identifying function-based behavior support plan and function-based interventions. Then module 6 focuses on implementation planning and leading your behavior support planning team through that process. And module 7 is focused primarily on evaluation and reviewing, ongoing review of the behavior support planning data to guide decision making. So you can see module 1 and module 4 here have the blue stars next to them, and those are the modules that we encourage you to do with your entire staff in the building, so that they get the critical features and the basics of behavior as a foundation, as a kind of a common foundation across folks, to increase the efficacy of and the efficiency of some of the FBA to BSP processes when we're working with the staff. So the trainings follow a pretty consistent routine. Usually each of the trainings starts by identifying the objectives that are going to be the focus of each of the modules. There's usually some review activities so that people are thinking about the things they learned at the last training and how to incorporate those. There's a number of activities, so that we try to embed a number of interactive activities where people get to actually practice applying some of the skills. We have checks for understanding throughout to make sure that folks are understanding what they're learning. There's place for comments or questions about each module, and then the homework task that's really critically important to transitioning this training into real world practice and application, and then a summary of the key points within each module. So when we start thinking about so far we've been providing you kind of an overview to guide you in understanding the theory and the intentions of the basic FBA to BSP program. Now, one of the other considerations as a district might be going through the exploration stage is, what's the evidence and the support behind this model? And so there's a growing number of studies out here around the efficacy of using the basic FBA to BSP training module to train school staff and to actually impact outcomes for students in a couple of studies cases. So here's just a handful of studies that have been conducted on basic FBA to BSP. There also have been a number of schools, districts, states out there who have utilized basic FBA to BSP as to guide training in their schools. So during the exploration stage, at the district level, some things to consider are improving the behavior support systems must be one of the top 3 priorities. We got to have administrative support, and we got to have strong coordination and leadership. So it's a good thing to form a leadership team and to bring together all the stakeholders for behavior support who are going to be participating in Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention. At the school level, again, we want to have improving behavior support systems be one of the top 3 priorities. We need to have that administrative support and buy-in at the school level. That's critically important. So buy-in to supporting students with recurring, persistent, chronic behavior problems, and supporting the notion that we should be implementing behavioral interventions to support and maintain those students in the least restrictive environment. Schools should have a strong Tier 1 and Tier 2 implementation in place. There should be team-based decision making that's occurring for students requiring more individualized support at the Tier 2 and Tier 3 level. We're committed to using data for decision making, and then identifying a team that's going to be trained to carry out the intervention. So we've created a little school readiness worksheet that you can find where you tapped into this training video here, and we encourage our schools to go through and identify, do you have the commitment from the administrator? Do you have a school-wide commitment? Do people believe this is important? It's something we need to do across the staff. Do you have Tier 1 fidelity measures that show evidence of a successful Tier 1 implementation and Tier 2 implementation? And then, sorry, I jumped ahead there a little bit. So this triangle is one of my favorites for just sort of capturing why Tier 1 and Tier 2 support are so critically important. So if you look at this triangle, this red is way too big and this yellow is way too big. Here, if we've got that many students requiring intensive individual support, our system is going to be completely overwhelmed. And it's going to be really hard to implement interventions in this context because it kind of looks like this context is going to be a chaotic, not very predictable environment in the classroom and the school. And it's really difficult to implement intensive individual behavior support plans in the contexts that are chaotic and out of control. So we absolutely want to be focusing on, do we have a good strong Tier 1 system in place and a good strong Tier 2 system in place? Because if we have those things in place, now we've got a chance. And so we want our triangle looking more like this. And when we're starting to talk about Tier 3 level supports, we're going to have a hard enough time supporting 5% of the students. We've got to really make sure our Tier 1 and Tier 2 are strong so that 5% doesn't turn into 10%. Because again of the resource intensive nature, a lot of these kids who might appear to be have Tier 3 needs, all of a sudden you put some good strong Tier 1 and Tier 2 systems in place and you start taking care of a number of those kids. And so that's critically important that we pay attention to Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions before we embark on Tier 3 and after we begin implementing a good Tier 3 program of positive behavior support. So back to the school readiness worksheet, you can see, do we have a need? Do we have a number of students who've got more than 5 referrals? Has the staff identified that individual student support systems are important? And then is this going to be feasible for us? Can we identify, 3 to 4 staff members in the school who will be trained to do basic functional behavioral assessment to behavior support? And then can we allocate some time to do training modules 1 and 4 with the entire staff? So this is an example of a worksheet that you might use, and some of the primary features we'd like to see schools committing to so they know what they're getting into before we begin training. It's not helpful if their folks are halfway into the training and we're springing things on them and blindsiding them with expectations of things they're going to carry out. So another thing is, in advance, during the exploration stage, it's good to identify what are the valued goals and outcomes that are going to justify this investment in basic FBA to BSP, and what are some goals we can set to try to, to really measure the benefits and the effects of basic FBA to BSP. So having the end in mind when we're thinking about outcomes that we want to see. All right, so the exploration stage is pretty heavy, I think, at the Tier 3 level because we know this is a big endeavor and it's a big commitment that we're moving into here. So the next thing is moving past the exploration stage to the installation phase. And now we get in the installation phase, and we're going to focus a lot on thinking about the competency drivers. We can never forget about leadership and organization, but this is where we really focus on, okay, installation, what's that going to look like and what's going to take to be successful. So on the district level, a lot of district planning, coordination, and support needs to go into this effort. And so, again, forming a district leadership team with stakeholders from the Tier 2 and Tier 3 implementation efforts and supports that are available across schools in your district and at the district level. Um, so we're going to be striving to build this school capacity and utilize coaching, training, and evaluation most effectively. And so this leadership team would plan, coordinate, and provide oversight to implementation of the basic FBA to BSP program in the school and then in the district. So this comes right from the PBIS, school-wide PBIS implementers blueprint, the district level organization logic. And so as we think about tier 2 and tier 3 implementation, you always want to be thinking, we got to have a leadership at the middle of this effort. And then this is training, coaching, and evaluation really are the key elements to a comprehensive professional development plan, and we want to have those built in and embedded within basic FBA to BSP. And then we need to have the district capacity, those behavior specialists who have the skills, the knowledge, the understanding, the experience to be able to guide folks through the training, coaching, and evaluation of good function-based assessment and intervention. Then the leadership team also needs to be thinking 3-5 years down the road, funding implications, visibility and political support, and what are the impacts on policy. And so always thinking about visibility and political support. And so we want to be looking at the outcomes and what do we want to be striving for if we're going to really strive for continued funding for a good tier 3 model in our district. So we've mentioned this a little bit before, but the behavior specialists really play a key role in this process. One of the ideas is that the basic FBA to BSP program is written so with the hopes that a district behavior specialist could pick it up and deliver the training themselves if they have a good, strong background in functional behavioral assessment. A lot of BCBAs, Board Certified Behavior Analysts, our hope is that they could pick this training up and deliver it with a pretty high level of efficacy. We've tried to structure it in ways that people could pick it up and use it. And we've also developed the online training module so that people could also use that as a possibility if they wanted to complete the trainings through the online modules. And so the district behavior specialists either way are going to kind of facilitate this process. If they're delivering the live trainings, they're going to have the responsibility of training. And if they want to sort of facilitate people going through the online training modules, they're going to have more focused responsibility on coaching and follow-up and feedback and coaching on site while teams are trying to implement and develop their behavior support plans. So that's going to be the case too with the live trainings. We always need to prepare both the live trainings and the online trainings with good follow-up coaching and feedback. And so the district leadership team is going to want to develop an annual training calendar, an annual coaching calendar, and an annual evaluation calendar, across tier 3, tier 2, and tier 1. But if we're really focusing on basic FBA to BSP, what needs to be included in those training calendars to really meet the needs, and what's the capacity necessary to carry that out in our schools? So this is an example of the district action planning form in the implementer's blueprint, and you can see under training, the schools, if they're going to carry out the basic FBA to BSP training, they'd be looking at on our calendar, can we put together, do we have 15 to 20 weeks in which that time, about every 2 weeks, we could offer one of these training modules. And then what's going to be the follow-up? We want to also have follow-up after training module 7 to provide ongoing support and check-ins to see how folks are doing with their basic FBA to BSP cases. So what's the training calendar going to look like? What is the coaching going to look like? So we need someone who's going to prompt and monitor completion of the homework tasks. If we're not really adamant about that, it's not going to happen in many cases. And so we need a coach who's going to be active and prompting and encouraging and helping to solve barriers and problems that might be getting in the way of carrying out some of the homework tasks, and then using the homework to be a primary means of providing feedback and informing some of the training needs that need to be um, gone over again. And that kind of pairs right with the evaluation. And so, we're going to evaluate the homework tasks for fidelity and see that'll inform some of our training and maybe things we need to review. And then also looking at, the Tier 3 fidelity measures and how we're making that a regular part of the cycle to monitor implementation in the buildings. And so then we can look at PBIS apps and PBIS assessment as tools for ongoing district level evaluation capacity. So with our schools, we want the student outcomes. We always want to be looking at student outcomes. And so at the Tier 3 level, we might be looking at ISIS Swiss. Tier 2 level, we might be looking at check-in, check-out Swiss. And then basic FBA to BSP also has its own data graphing template, which you might be able to use to monitor student outcomes. So we want to make sure that there's a clear plan for monitoring student outcomes, and then at the district level, being able to look across schools and aggregate some of the outcomes and see how are we doing on achieving the goals that we set, that we wanted to see as the benefits and the outcomes of implementing Tier 3 supports in the basic FBA to BSP. And then how about the fidelity measures? And then we get into PBIS assessment and the number of different tools that are available there. And at the district level, we might pay for PBIS evaluation, which if you're a larger district, that might be an account where it makes it easier to organize and look at your data as a whole. But you don't have to buy that PBIS evaluation, and PBIS assessment is free to any schools or districts that want to use it. So some of the Tier 3 fidelity measures that are available, the tiered fidelity inventory, there's a Tier 3 section specific to Tier 3 monitoring. The Monitoring Advanced Tiers tool, the MAT, and the benchmarks of advanced tiers are additional tools out there that schools could use or districts and schools could use to really guide school planning around their Tier 3 systems overall. And additional sort of fidelity tools might be really looking at some of the functional behavioral assessment interviews collected, some of the behavior support plans collected, some of the evaluation plans, and the student data and fidelity data being collected to ensure that we're seeing the outcomes and the fidelity that we want in the staff's use of practices after they are participating in basic FBA to BSP. All right, so the next stage, initial implementation. So now we're right in the middle of training. Folks are going through the process of basic FBA to BSP. Like I mentioned, there's the online training site and as well as the live training materials. And so if you go to basicfba.com, that'll take you to this site here, and you can take a look at these modules and see what do you think is going to work better for you. One other thing is the behavior specialists can actually watch or participate in the online trainings as a model for them before they deliver the live trainings themselves, if they want to see how the developers intended on delivering the trainings. So we've got the 7 modules, and remember, every 2 weeks there'll be another module trained, and then the team at each site. The intention is that the basic FBA to BSP team members would deliver module 1 or module 4, or they would ask all their staff. They would deliver those staff wide, or else they would ask their staff to complete the online training module as part of the training. And so letting them know that it's going to be about a 75 to 90 minute training, but they can now do it on their own. And one of the things that they can do is actually collect from staff members there's a kind of a certificate of completion, or just reporting of scores on each module completed that they could then turn into the administrator or whoever. So initial implementation, the FBA to BSP team at each school site is going to receive training in each module. They should go and complete the homework task and then get feedback and coaching. That feedback and coaching is so critical. We can't emphasize that enough. So really being planful about that. And like I've been sort of saying all along, this is Tier 3 is where this is challenging. It's tough stuff. And we can't expect that people are going to go see the training and be perfect or be fluent in this after that initial training. And so ongoing coaching, monitoring, and feedback are absolutely essential. Excuse me. So if you look on the, this is the example from the Basic FBA to BSP online training. You can see here the homework tasks for each module. And then you can also see there's a coaching tool here. And the idea is that we could use those coaching tools if we collect the homework task from each of the participants for Module 2. We could use the coaching tool for Module 2 to provide some feedback and assess how effective they were in completing their homework when they applied these skills they learned to a real live student case. All right, so and then again, this is just the beginning. We need to go on and continue to build fluency. Going through the training once, working on one case is not going to cut it. So the teams need to be encouraged and prompted to complete additional cases throughout the end of the year to really build a level of fluency that's going to be meaningful. Every time they do this, it's probably going to become a little bit easier, a little bit more efficient, and a little bit more effective. And so, we want that team to be thinking about, completing a handful of cases as they progress through the year. And so we want to also set up different ways to encourage ongoing networking and communication between our FBA to BSP teams, basic FBA to BSP teams across school sites. And so we might have, even after Module 7, we'd encourage you to have regular times when the behavior specialists that are newly trained in basic FBA to BSP, that they come together to share ideas, to problem solve, to discuss things that have been challenges, and you're kind of creating a community, a network of implementers that are able to help problem solve some of these things for each other. So in the same time, you can identify ongoing training needs and provide additional professional development based on some of the data you might be collecting from the things that you're seeing are weaker or stronger in the homework tasks based on the feedback forms and the coaching forms that you're using. Then the next thing is that supportive school context. And so the staff-wide training of Module 1 and Module 4, and by doing that, we should be able to increase staff buy-in. We should be able to increase their understanding of behavior, and hopefully they're able to identify what's going on with the student and hopefully intervene more effectively themselves in the classroom on their own. And then we're also going to become more efficient in data collection and interviews with staff members. Like the homework task for Module 1 is this ABC tracker form. And if we have staff completing that ABC tracker for a student and bringing that to even our Tier 2 team meetings, that'll be a great piece of information as like a preliminary functional behavioral assessment for a student. That's been enormously helpful in some of the cases that I've worked in. And so you might start thinking about that ABC tracker as like a preliminary functional behavioral assessment if your staff have been trained already in the basics of behavior. And then when we do sit down and do a functional behavioral assessment interview, they're likely to kind of see things from a similar lens if they've had that training, and be more. It should increase again the efficiency of the interviews we're conducting. And then intervention selection might also be increased in efficiency if people have more of a common understanding of function-based intervention and why we might be using a replacement behavior, which sometimes causes staff to feel a little bit uncomfortable when they hear about it the first time. And so a basic understanding around the basics of behavior and function-based intervention could help everything be a little bit more efficient and save minutes all along the way. So that staff-wide training, if you want to do it as an online training module, one of the things I do, what you can do is ask them to complete it, set a deadline, and have them turn in. There's a scores sheet at the end, so you can either do a screenshot of the scoring page, or you can see down at the bottom of this page, they can enter their email address in, and then they'll have an email sent to them that reports their scores to them. And so I'll oftentimes do this with my students, where they will either print this out and send it to me as part of an assignment, or they will send me the email that they got from the training and forward that to me directly as evidence of completion. All right, so now the last stage here, full implementation. So after they've had the training and they've had ongoing coaching and feedback. Now, hopefully, finally, we're moving to increasing levels of skill, and hopefully, the teams now are able to work on some of these cases and be successful with them, independent of a district level behavior specialist. And then, when they have those more complex cases, they give that behavior specialist a call and bring them in. And if they're doing this well, the behavior specialist can kind of slide right in because they're very, very knowledgeable in the process that the teams are implementing in the school, and so they'll be able to pick up that initial information and create again a lot of efficiencies because they're doing things from a similar lens, a similar framework. So over the years, planning for sustainability is going to be important, and so think about booster trainings over the years. And I would say that all behavior support planning teams, basic FBA to BSP teams over the years are going to need ongoing booster sessions. And so again, you can use data from your coaching tools and your fidelity measures to inform the training topics to cover. You always want to plan for staff turnover and new staff. Encourage you to, your behavior specialist should meet with the school teams, the administration, and the basic FBA to BSP teams at each school site towards the end of each year and start planning for turnover and who do we need to train to maintain capacity, who are going to be the people who are on this team next year, and start developing transition plans for those kids who have behavior support plans this spring who will be coming back in the fall. And so really starting to think about not letting the summer pass without having a good plan for how we're going to move forward. And then at the district level as well as at the school level, it becomes really important for sustainability purposes that we're making the valued outcomes we want to achieve visible. So at the district level, this means taking it to the school board and presenting, making sure that data is getting out there in newsletters and getting to the principals and getting to the district administrators, making sure the key stakeholders, the parents, the families are telling their stories about successful cases and some of the outcomes that we might be looking for, increased student achievement amongst those kids with the most challenging behavior, reduced referrals, decreased time in the delivery of behavior supports to students, and fewer office discipline referrals, decreased referrals of students to more restrictive educational placements. There's a whole realm of potential outcomes, and we want to make sure that we're really thoughtful and strategic about reporting those and getting the word out there so we've got that political support and that visibility to maintain funding, especially if you're thinking about changing up the behavior specialist roles or increasing capacity of behavior specialists. Then similarly at the school level, you don't keep these things in a bubble. You've got to let the school staff know and understand we went through this training and now look, you guys are doing a better job of implementing interventions earlier and we're not having as many referrals to functional behavioral assessment. And when we are, they're not going to intense levels because we're addressing these in October compared to 3 years ago when we were having, all these students with requiring more intensive behavior support needs. And so really sharing the success stories and making sure that there's visible valued outcomes to increase buy-in and support from different participants and stakeholders within the school. All right, so that wraps up kind of this introduction. I hope it is helpful and it gives you some plans about how to really maximize the basic FBA to BSP training. So this little plug here, at Portland State University, I offer a online school-wide PBIS coaching certificate, and we do have, it's a series of 4 courses. The last 2 courses are coaching Tier 2 PBIS implementation and coaching Tier 3 PBIS implementation. And so if you want to have more support in delivering the basic FBA to BSP program and really go into depth with that, the coaching certificate and in particular a couple of those courses might be helpful. And so you can find more information at the website listed at the bottom of the screen there. So thank you again for participating in this training, and I wish you the best. And if you have any questions or you'd like to collaborate on implementation and use of the basic FBA to BSP training, please contact me and let me know. Or you can contact my colleagues Sheldon Lohman or Kathleen Strickland Cohen or Rob Horner as well. All right, thank you, and best wishes in developing your school capacity to support students requiring those tier 3 behavioral supports.